The first thing I noticed about Duke Adrian Whitlock was that he didn't smile. Not once, not even when the Emperor announced our engagement in front of half the court. Everyone clapped, whispered, gasped, and there he stood, tall and stoic, like the embodiment of every bad decision I'd ever made. I, Valerie Petriva, daughter of the house that had allegedly ruined his, was about to become his wife. A political marriage, they called it. A peace treaty wearing a diamond ring. And I was the unwilling ambassador of chaos. The court ballroom glimmered with chandeliers, laughter, and false congratulations. Every noblewoman pretended not to stare, and every nobleman pretended not to pity me. "Smile, Countess," my father hissed beside me, his voice sweet poison. "You're making history." "I'm making a mistake," I muttered back, lifting my chin. Across the room, the Duke's cold eyes found mine. Gray, the color of storm clouds right before lightning strikes. He inclined his head slightly, a gesture so controlled it felt like an insult. And yet, something in me shivered. That night, after the banquet, I found myself packing the balcony of the Petriva estate, replaying the words I'd overheard. "Poor girl, the Duke detests her family. Didn't her father steal Whitlock lands? I heard her future husband called her a necessary sacrifice. Lovely." My future sounded like a funeral in slow motion. The next morning, the Duke arrived to finalize our betrothal contract. He didn't bother to remove his gloves or his disdain. "Countess Petriva," he greeted coolly, "I trust you understand the nature of our arrangement." I gave him my brightest fake smile. Of course, a lifetime of marital bliss built on mutual resentment. How romantic. His eyes flickered, amusement, maybe. It was hard to tell when his face was carved from marble. "I prefer honesty," he said, walking closer. "This marriage serves the empire, not sentiment, not affection." "And not forgiveness, I assume?" I asked quietly. A pause, the faintest tightening of his jaw. "No, certainly not forgiveness." Later that day, I found myself in the Grand Whitlock Library, my new home. He'd invited me, apparently, to acquaint myself with my duties. I assumed that meant learning how to avoid him effectively. Rows upon rows of old books, all in perfect order. The Duke himself sat at his desk, writing letters with military precision. He looked more commander than husband, every movement deliberate, his back straight, his quill merciless. "You're starring," he said without looking up. "Just wondering if you ever blink," I replied sweetly. He looked up then, eyes sharp as glass. "Do you always speak like that, Countess?" "Only when breathing," I said, smiling. Something flickered in his gaze, irritation, yes, but also curiosity. For a moment, I thought he might actually smile. He didn't. But the corner of his mouth almost twitched, and I counted that as a small victory. That night, as I stood before the mirror in my new chambers, I thought of the man downstairs, the man who hated me without knowing me, the man I was supposed to marry, and the family feud that had started this mess. If the Petrovas had truly wronged the Whitlocks, then maybe I didn't just inherit my father's debts. Maybe I inherited his sins. Still, as I blew out the candle and whispered to my reflection, "Don't fall for him," a traitorous voice inside my chest whispered back, "Too late. Weddings are supposed to be about love." Mine was about revenge, politics, and possibly emotional homicide. The Whitlock Cathedral was drenched in gold, sunlight spilling through stained glass, petals scattered down the aisle, courtiers pretending not to whisper. And me, Valerie Petriva, standing beside the man who probably wished I'd trip on my own gown and make history for falling spectacularly. Duke Adrian Whitlock, my soon-to-be husband, looked devastatingly composed. Of course he did. The man probably practiced being unreadable in front of a mirror every morning. When the priest asked if he took me as his lawfully wedded wife, he said, "I do," as if signing a business contract. When it was my turn, I smiled brightly and said, "I do," with just enough dramatic pause to make the court collectively hold its breath. If they expected tears or scandal, they were disappointed. Because when the Duke leaned in to kiss me, a cold, perfect kiss that tasted like pride and unspoken war, I smiled against his lips and whispered, "Congratulations, Your Grace. You've officially ruined your own life." That night, I was escorted to the Whitlock estate, my new home. The carriage ride was silent, except for the sound of rain and my rapidly deteriorating will to live. He finally spoke when we reached the gates. "Certain rooms of the manor are off-limits." "Let me guess," I said, peering out the window. "The basement where you keep your emotional vulnerability." His jaw twitched. "You find this amusing." "I find most things amusing, Your Grace," I said, stepping out into the drizzle. "It's how I survive rich men with vendettas." His silence was answer enough. The Whitlock Manor was beautiful, the kind of beauty that hides secrets behind its symmetry. Every hallway smelled faintly of cedar and rain. Every portrait stared just a little too long. When I entered the grand dining hall, a line of servants bowed. At the far end of the table, Adrian stood like a shadow waiting for judgment. "Your chambers are at the east wing," he said curtly. "I've arranged for you to have your own staff. Discretion is expected." "Meaning you don't want people to think we actually talk?" I asked. "Meaning I don't wish to subject anyone to our dynamic." "Ah," I said, sitting down. "You're worried they'll realize I'm charming and overthrow you as head of the house." A muscle jumped in his cheek. "You mistake defiance for wit, Countess." "And you mistake bitterness for dignity," I replied sweetly. "We all have flaws." He almost smiled. I swear he almost did before turning away. Over the next few weeks, our marriage became a strange dance of civility and sparks. We shared meals, in silence. We attended court together, as a perfect political pair. And behind closed doors, we argued about everything. About the estate. About my father. About who left the library windows open. It was him, obviously. But somewhere between the arguments and the sarcastic remarks, something began to shift. He stopped correcting me in front of others. He started asking, quietly, if I'd eaten. Once, when I slipped on the stairs, his hand caught my arm before I could fall, and for a heartbeat, the mask dropped. His eyes weren't cold, they were terrified. Then, as quickly as it came, the warmth vanished. "Be careful, Countess," he said quietly. "You're not as untouchable as you think." "I never was," I replied. It was Lily, my dearest friend, and chaos incarnate, who first noticed it. "You're glowing," she said one afternoon, sprawled across my sofa, eating pastries like it was an Olympic event. "I'm annoyed," I corrected. "It's called irritation, common side effect of proximity to my husband." She smirked. "Right, and irritation makes your cheeks that pink." I threw a pillow at her. "Go back to your own marriage plot, Lily." But later that night, as I caught Adrian reading by the fireplace, his hair falling into his eyes, the light softening the edges of his anger, I realized something horrifying. He was beautiful. And worse, I was starting to care. A week later, I overheard something that changed everything. Two courtiers, whispering in the gallery. "They say the Duke only married her to reclaim Petriva lands. Once the treaty is secure, he'll annul it." My stomach twisted. So that was his plan all along. That night, when I confronted him, I expected denial. I didn't expect silence. "Is it true?" I demanded. "You married me to destroy my family." His expression didn't falter. "Your father destroyed mine long before this. I'm simply finishing what he began." I laughed, cold and hollow. "So I'm your retribution." "You were the price," he said quietly, "until you became something I didn't plan for." That threw me. And what's that supposed to mean? He turned away, voice low. "A distraction." For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. Then I smiled, sharp, practiced, unshaken. "Well," I said softly, "let's see who ruins whom first, shall we?" The Whitlock estate was the kind of place that remembered everything. Even secrets had their own rooms here. By the 3rd week of marriage, I'd learned 3 things about my husband. He woke before dawn. He could ruin someone's reputation before breakfast. And despite being the coldest man in the empire, he always stopped to feed the stray cat outside the West Wing. That last one confused me more than anything, because men who plotted revenge didn't usually pause to offer milk to something small and starving. I was in the library when he found me that morning, sitting on the floor, surrounded by ledgers and half-burned letters. Investigating again, his voice was smooth, unreadable. "Reading," I said, pretending to flip a page. "I enjoy learning about ancient Whitlock curses, particularly the ones that end in ironic deaths." A low sound escaped him, half amusement, half warning. "Ironic deaths can be arranged, Countess. So can poetic justice," I shot back. He walked closer, until his shadow spilled across the open pages. "You've been asking questions," he said quietly. "About my brother, about the Petrovas. Should I not? You should be careful. And you should be honest," I said, looking up at him. "Why do you hate my family so much?" For the first time since our wedding, his composure cracked. Just slightly, a muscle at his jaw, a flicker in his gaze. "My brother died because of your father," he said finally. "A border treaty gone wrong. He trusted Count Petriva. He paid for it with his life." I wanted to argue, to deny it. But I'd seen my father's letters, and I knew enough about power to recognize guilt in ink. So I said nothing. That silence stretched between us for days, thin as glass, sharp enough to cut. At dinners, we spoke through polite words and stolen glances. At night, I heard him packing the hallway, as if haunted by things he could never say. And still, he kept feeding that cat. One evening, as rain lashed against the windows, I found him there again, kneeling in his shirt sleeves, hair damp, offering scraps from his plate. "Do you think she forgives you?" I asked softly. He didn't look up. "Who?" "The cat, for scaring her half to death when you slammed your study door this morning." He turned then, eyes glinting with something tired and real. "Do you?" The question hit harder than it should have. I swallowed. "I'm considering it." He huffed a breath, almost a laugh. "You're infuriating." "So I've been told." And then something shifted. He reached up slowly, as though even he didn't trust himself, and brushed a raindrop from my cheek. The air stilled. The rain faded. And for the first time, his hand didn't feel like a threat. Later that night, Lily barged into my room, uninvited, naturally. "Tell me everything," she demanded, plopping onto my bed. "There's nothing to tell." Her grin said otherwise. "You're blushing." "I'm irritated." "Mem," she hummed, flipping through one of my books. "Irritated by your husband's eyes, no doubt." "Lily." She raised her brows. "Oh, come on, Valerie. The entire court's gossiping about you too. They say you were seen walking together in the gardens." "We were arguing. Romantically, I hope." I threw a cushion at her. She caught it, laughing. But beneath the teasing, I could feel my pulse betraying me. Because the truth was simple and awful. I was starting to fall for the man who'd married me to destroy me. The next morning, I found a letter on my desk. No seal, no signature. Just one line written in Adrian's unmistakable hand. "There are things your father never told you. Meet me in the East Wing at midnight." When the clock struck 12, I went. Because of course I did. Curiosity has always been my favorite form of self-destruction. The East Wing was dark, lit only by moonlight spilling through tall windows. He was waiting by the old portrait gallery, standing before a painting of his late brother. "His name was Edmund," he said quietly. "He believed in honor more than sense, and he trusted your father with the wrong secret." "What secret?" He handed me a faded parchment, a treaty, marked with both Whitlock and Petriva seals. But at the bottom, the Petriva signature had been forged. I stared. "That means?" "That my family's ruin was planned. Someone wanted war between our houses. My throat tightened. Then you've hated the wrong people all this time. He turned toward me, and for the first time, I saw grief instead of anger in his eyes. Perhaps, he said softly, or perhaps I just didn't want to see the truth. We stood there, two people raised to be enemies, realizing we were both someone else's pawns. And when he stepped closer, I didn't move away. Valerie, he said quietly, voice breaking on my name. If I could undo it all. You can't, I whispered, but you can stop punishing me for a sin that wasn't mine. His hand brushed my cheek again, hesitant, reverent. Then what should I do instead? I smiled faintly. Start by meaning it when you say my name. He exhaled, almost a laugh, almost a surrender. And when he said it again, Valerie, it wasn't vengeance anymore. It was something dangerously close to love. The morning after our midnight meeting, I did something very unwise. I smiled at my husband in public. The reaction was immediate. By afternoon, half the court had fainted. The other half had started drafting wedding rumors about our wedding. Lady Penrose was the first to corner me, her fan fluttering like a nervous bird. Countess Whitlock, she whispered, eyes gleaming with malicious curiosity. I heard His Grace escorted you to breakfast. Yes, I said evenly. It's the sort of thing husbands do when they aren't plotting your social demise. She blinked, disoriented by my tone. You must be thrilled. I'm something, I said, sipping my tea. Across the room, Adrian was deep in conversation with a minister. But even from here, I could feel when his gaze shifted, a subtle, electric thing that made me wish my heart had better sense. Later that day, in the privacy of his study, I returned the parchment he'd given me. The forged treaty that had killed his brother. He looked at me like it weighed less in his hand than it did in his chest. I'll expose the truth, he said quietly. Expose it, yes, I said, but carefully. Whoever forged that signature has powerful friends, the kind that make enemies disappear in the river. His mouth curved faintly. You sound like me. Terrifying, isn't it? He laughed, and for once it wasn't sharp. It was low, warm, the kind of laugh that made you forget who you were fighting. I underestimated you, Valerie, he said. I was counting on it. The storm rolled in like an uninvited guest, loud and relentless. I'd taken refuge in the west balcony, away from the prying eyes of the servants. The rain lashed against the marble railings, and lightning lit up the courtyard like a memory I couldn't shake. Then came the sound of footsteps, measured, deliberate. Of course it was him. Do you plan to catch a fever or make a scene? Adrian asked, his voice cutting through the wind. He was holding a cloak, one far too fine for someone he once swore to ruin. I like the rain, I said, refusing to look at him. It reminds me that not everything can be controlled. He draped the cloak around my shoulders anyway, his fingers grazing the back of my neck for a fraction too long. Not everything should be, he murmured. For a long moment, we stood there, the silence heavy with words neither of us dared to say. You should hate me, he said suddenly. I tried, I admitted softly, turning to meet his eyes. But you keep doing inconvenient things, like being human. His jaw clenched, not in anger this time, but something closer to surrender. Your family destroyed mine, he said. You expect me to forget that? No, I whispered, but maybe remember that I'm not them. Lightning flashed again, and for a heartbeat, the entire world froze in silver light. His face, so close to mine, caught between guilt and longing. And then, like a fool, I reached up and touched his cheek. He didn't pull away. In fact, he leaned closer, too close, dangerously close, until thunder broke the moment apart like glass. I should go, I said quickly, heart pounding. Yes, he breathed, but neither of us moved. For the first time, I realized the truth. He wasn't fighting me. He was fighting himself. The rain softened to a steady drizzle, the kind that hummed quietly over the stone. We stood beneath the archway, him too close, me too aware. Adrian's gaze dropped to my lips, and I swore my breath forgot how to exist. "Valerie," he said my name, not Countess Petrova, not my lady, just Valerie, and it sounded like a confession. "Yes," my voice came out smaller than I intended. He took a step closer. I felt the warmth of him even through the rain-chilled air. Every rational thought screamed to move away. He was the man who'd sworn vengeance on my bloodline, not the one who should be standing this near, looking this undone. "I shouldn't," he began. "I know," I whispered. But neither of us moved. Lightning flashed again, white and electric, and for an instant we were both caught in it, two people bound by too much history and too little sense. His hand lifted, brushing a damp curl away from my cheek. The touch was feather-light, hesitant, like he feared I'd vanish if he pressed harder. "Tell me to stop," he murmured. "I can't," I said, and it was the truth. I couldn't, not when the world suddenly felt unbearably alive. He leaned in, so close I could feel his breath, taste the storm in it. Every inch between us felt like a question neither of us dared to answer. But just as the distance closed, a crack of thunder tore through the night, loud enough to rattle the windows. I startled, he flinched, and the spell shattered. For a heartbeat, we just stared at each other, breathless, reckless, both silently cursing the weather. Then he stepped back. "You should go inside," he said hoarsely, "before I forget why I shouldn't." And he turned away, leaving me there, clutching his cloak around me like a memory I had no right to keep. His study was dimly lit, just the fire crackling low in the hearth and the faint scent of cedar smoke curling through the air. The rest of the manor slept. Only I was foolish enough to wander its corridors this late, sleepless and haunted by the echo of a conversation I shouldn't have overheard. "She's a Petrova, a name cursed with deceit." I had told myself it didn't matter, that Adrian's opinions of my family weren't mine to fix. Yet somehow, it did matter far too much. And so here I was, standing by his desk, staring at the map he'd been drawing on. His world inked neatly, perfectly, the opposite of mine. Couldn't sleep either. His voice came from behind me, quiet, rough with fatigue. I turned, startled. He leaned against the doorway, his shirt slightly undone, sleeves rolled to his forearms, looking more human than any duke had a right to. The firelight softened the sharpness in his gaze, and for a fleeting second, I forgot why we were supposed to despise each other. "I didn't realize the study belonged to you after midnight as well," I said, trying for levity, but my voice came out gentler than I meant. He smiled faintly, that half-curved, knowing thing he did when he saw through my defenses. "It belongs to neither of us tonight, apparently." He moved closer, slow, deliberate. Every step seemed to draw the air thinner. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop earlier," I whispered, eyes darting to the floor. "But I heard what you said about my family." He paused beside the desk, not pretending ignorance. "Then you know I wasn't wrong." Something inside me twisted. "Maybe not, but you were cruel." He looked at me then, really looked, not as a duke to his unwanted bride, but as a man seeing someone he didn't quite understand. "Cruelty was easier," he murmured. "Hatred is easier than doubt." I swallowed hard, my heart thrumming unevenly. "And what do you doubt, Your Grace?" He took another step closer, until I could feel the warmth radiating from him. "That the sins of the Petrovas are truly yours, that you're the same woman I swore to despise." The silence between us grew heavy, the kind that trembles with words unsaid. "I never wanted this marriage," I said softly, "but I didn't come here to ruin you, Adrian." His name felt strange on my tongue, like something forbidden, intimate. His breath hitched. "And yet," he whispered, "you've ruined everything I thought I knew." The world slowed. The fire crackled, a log fell, sparks danced. He reached out, hesitated, then brushed his fingers against a loose strand of hair at my cheek. My pulse stumbled. "Tell me to stop," he said, voice rougher now. I should have. I meant to. But the truth was, I didn't want him to stop. "Instead," I said, "then don't make promises you intend to keep." That broke him. His restraint cracked open like ice underfoot. One second there was distance, the next none. His hand cupped my face, the other settled at my waist, and his lips found mine with a tenderness that felt like confession. It wasn't a kiss meant for witnesses or victory. It was quiet, trembling, an apology and a question all at once. But then he deepened it, slow at first, then with the fierce hunger of a man starved too long. My hands found his collar, fingers clutching, grounding myself before I forgot who I was. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against mine, both of us breathing as if we'd just survived a storm. "I told myself you were my ruin," he whispered, "but maybe you're the only thing left that could save me." I managed a shaky laugh, tears pricking at the edges of my vision. "You do realize that sounds dreadfully romantic for a man who swore he'd never love me." He smiled against my lips, his voice low and dangerous. "Then I suppose I've already failed." And when he kissed me again, deeper, unguarded, the fire didn't seem so lonely anymore. The first snow of winter dusted the gardens of Whitlock Manor. It made everything look gentler than it really was, as though the world had forgiven itself overnight. I used to hate the silence here. Now it feels like peace. Months have passed since the scandal, since the truth about the Petriva betrayal came to light, that it was never my family's treachery, but one man's greed dressed in our name. The hatred that once fueled Adrian's vengeance is gone, replaced by something terrifyingly simple. Love. He still works too late in his study, still forgets his gloves, still insists that the world can be fixed with sheer willpower. But sometimes, when the firelight catches him just right, I see that boy again, the one who laughed before duty made him hard. He looks up from his papers, sensing me at the doorway. "Valerie," he says softly, as though my name alone steadies him. "Your Grace," I tease, slipping closer, the silk of my gown whispering over the floorboards. He sets his quill aside. We're long past that title, wife. The word still makes me melt. Wife, not Countess, not a Petriva, just his. I step behind him, wrapping my arms over his shoulders and rest my chin atop his head. "The council still doubts us," I murmur. "They think our marriage was strategy." He chuckles, low and rough. "Then let them. Let them think I married you to destroy you. The truth would only scandalize them." "And what's that truth, my ruinous duke?" He turns in his chair, catching my hand and pressing it to his lips. "That I married you because I couldn't imagine breathing without you." It's ridiculous, dramatic, and entirely him. I laugh, but it breaks halfway, tangled in something tender. He studies me for a long moment. "You don't regret any of it?" "The ruin," I whisper. "No, because it gave me you." Outside, the bells from the chapel chime. Guests gather beyond the courtyard, nobles, allies, those who once whispered that we would destroy each other. Instead, we rebuilt everything. He rises, offering his arm. "Shall we give them something new to gossip about?" I smirk, "If we must." He leads me out through the grand doors, where sunlight glints off the snow, scattering gold across the marble steps. The crowd quiets as we appear, two names once cursed, now spoken with reluctant admiration. Adrian squeezes my hand, voice low enough only for me. "Let them see that ruin can be beautiful." I glance up at him, the man who once vowed to hate me, who now looks at me as if I were his entire salvation. "Then let's give them something to remember." We descend together, the Duke and Duchess of Whitlock, not born of vengeance, but of choice, two stubborn hearts that found peace in the wreckage. Later, as the sun dips below the horizon, we walk alone through the frost-tipped gardens. He brushes snow from my shoulder and murmurs, "I still think you're trouble." "Of course I am," I reply, smiling. "You married me for it." He laughs, warm, unguarded, and kisses me there among the roses now blooming against all reason. And for once there is no ruin, no anger, no pretense, just us. The laughter lingered, soft as snow. For a long while we just stood there, two silhouettes in a world washed silver. Somewhere beyond the hedges, the musicians from the celebration were still playing, the notes drifting faintly on the wind. Adrian took my hands, his gloves forgotten again, and said, almost absently, "Do you remember the first time we met here, before everything?" "I remember," I said. You stepped on my skirt and pretended it was my fault." He grinned, that same boyish grin I once sworn I'd never fall for. "You threw wine at me. You deserved it." He drew me closer until our breath mingled in the cold. "And yet here we are, you still defiant, me still undeserving." I traced the line of his jaw, the faint scar near his temple, a mark from battles both political and personal. "You're wrong," I murmured. "We were both broken things trying to win, and somehow we ended up healing instead." His gaze softened. "No, Valerie, you healed me." The words were simple, but they stole the air from my chest. There was no grand declaration, no audience to hear it, just truth, plain and steady, like the snow falling around us. I leaned into him. "And you taught me that love doesn't have to be survival." He smiled, brushing his thumb along my cheek. "No, it just has to be stubborn." I laughed, quiet, genuine, and tilted my face up to his. "Then we're both doomed." "Gladly." The kiss that followed was nothing like the first, not desperate or uncertain, but calm and infinite. It felt like the closing of a circle, a vow renewed not in ink or ceremony, but in breath and warmth. When we parted, the world had shifted. The sky, once gray, bled into gold, and the bells began to toll again, softer this time, as though even the heavens approved. We walked the garden path until the manor lights glimmered like constellations behind us. The servants would be waiting, the council still scheming, the world forever ready to test us, but for that single evening, none of it mattered. He stopped by the old marble fountain, the one his ancestors had built centuries ago. The water had frozen over, glassy and still. Adrian bent down, tracing our reflections. "Strange," he murmured, "how ruin can become legacy." "Or how hate can become love," I offered. He looked up at me, and in that moment, I saw everything we had survived, deceit, loss, pride, forgiveness, distilled into one unguarded expression. "Then let's build something worth remembering," he said. And we did. In the years that followed, the manor's halls filled with laughter again. The old portraits of Whitlocks and Petrivas, once kept apart, now hung side by side. The feud became a story told to children, a warning of what pride can destroy and love can restore. Sometimes I'd find Adrian in the nursery, pretending not to be enchanted by the small girl tugging at his sleeve. "She has your defiance," he'd say. "And your impossible patience," I'd reply. At night, when the fires dimmed and the world grew quiet, he would hold me close and whisper, "Still trouble, Valerie." "Always," I'd say, smiling into his chest. And his laughter, that rare, unguarded sound, would fill the darkness until morning. Years later, when the snow came again, I stood in the garden where it had all begun. The roses bloomed crimson against the frost, and though time had softened everything, the pain, the scandal, the anger, one truth remained untouched. We had been ruin. We had been redemption. But more than that, we had been real. And as I turned toward the manor, where my husband waited with a cup of tea and a half-smile, I knew that some stories don't end. They simply continue, quietly, beautifully, forever.